The health mechanic in Daniel Mullen's Inscryption is unlike that of any other game I've played. While it's represented on screen in different ways throughout the game, the functionality remains mostly consistent. The health value can range from -5 to +5 and starts at 0. Each damage dealt to the player will lower the health value by 1, and each damage dealt to the opponent will raise it by the same amount. With the exception of boss fights, the encounter ends when one side has taken a total of 5 damage more than the other. In boss fights, beating the opponent for the first time will reset the health value to 0 and trigger a unique effect for each boss. If the player wins, any damage they deal on the final turn that exceeds the damage needed to win gives them a unit of currency, which changes in each act. These golden teeth, foils, and Robux can be used to improve their deck in a variety of ways. These two mechanics being tied together creates interesting ways for the player to strategize and formulate their offense and defense. Sometimes you may want to come just short of defeating your opponent in order to do lots of damage on the next turn and receive a larger reward. There are also items you can use to tip the scales in your favor. Early on, you can find a pair of pliers that, when used, violently pull a tooth out of your mouth. The screen shakes and the game plays visual and sound effects that make you wince. This tooth gets placed on the opponent's side of the scale and is worth 1 damage/health. Later on, you can find a knife. When you activate the knife, the player character uses it to remove his right eye from his head and places it on the opponent's side of the scale. This eye is worth 4 health/damage, but because you're now missing your right eye, you won't be able to see the whole right side of the field and your hand. If you win the battle, you're offered a replacement eye, one of which will progress the story, meaning if you want to beat the game, you'll have to take this risk at some point. During the first act of the game, the health is represented by a simple scale. Each damage dealt to a character will put a tooth on their side. There's also a series of notches along the top of the scale that show how far it's leaning to one side. However, due to the dark environment in the first stage, it can be hard to tell exactly how much damage is on the scales. In the second act, the scale is an indicator above it, more like you would see on a board game, with a line that has 11 notches representing the balance of health. Additionally, the scale looks more digitalized, with numbers representing the total damage to each side instead of a pile of teeth. And finally, in the third act, the scale looks like a combination of the two. It's rendered in 3D again, but still has the easily visible indicator above it. In this act, the indicator will also change colors, turning more red as the health value falls below 0. Finally, the damage in this stage is shown on the scale as Robux. Because the dark environment has returned from the first act, the brightly lit indicator and neon design of the scale make it much easier to see what the health value is at.